Hear that? It's the roar of a brand new engine, the blast of a jazz trumpet, and the secret password whispered through a hidden door.
Swordfish.
It's the sound of a nation coming alive, ready to break all the rules after surviving a brutal war. This was the 1920s, a decade of dazzling innovation and deep-seated fear. An era that gave us heroes who conquered the skies and gangsters who ruled the streets. But what happens when an entire country decides to throw a 10-year-long party? Let's find out. If you're ready to time travel back to the most turbulent and exciting decade in American history, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell. You don't want to miss a single moment of this journey, because history is way more interesting than you think. The story of the Roaring Twenties begins at the end of two global nightmares, the Great War and the 1918 flu pandemic. A generation had seen the horrors of modern warfare and disease. They came back feeling disillusioned, restless, and searching for a way to feel alive again. And a new start is what they got. The 1920s saw a massive economic boom. Factories that once made weapons now churned out amazing new products. For the first time, many families could afford a car, a radio, and appliances that made life easier, often bought using a revolutionary new idea: credit. This era also saw a massive internal migration. Millions of African Americans moved from the rural South to northern cities, seeking better jobs and escaping Jim Crow oppression. They brought their culture, their food, and their music with them. And that music was jazz. Bubbling up from African American communities in New Orleans, it was improvisational, energetic, and it broke all the old rules. It was the perfect sound for a generation ready to break some rules of their own. This cultural explosion was centered in places like New York. The Harlem Renaissance became a golden age for African American artists, writers, and musicians. At the same time, a group of songwriters and music publishers known as Tin Pan Alley were churning out the popular hits that were played on every new radio in the country. This wasn't your grandparents' waltz, the Charleston, the Lindy Hop. These were dances of freedom and expression. The Jazz Age was more than just music. It was a cultural rebellion. But while the cities roared, a powerful movement was determined to silence the party. Fueled by groups like the Anti-Saloon League, the 18th Amendment went into effect in 1920, making alcohol illegal. This was Prohibition, the noble experiment. Noble? Maybe. An experiment? Definitely. And the results were explosive. Did people stop drinking? Absolutely not. They just got more creative, becoming bootleggers and rum runners. Secret bars called speakeasies popped up everywhere. It's estimated there were over 30,000 in New York City alone. You needed a password to get in, and the threat of a police raid was always looming, which only made it more exciting. And who supplied the illegal booze? Enter the gangster. Men like Al Capone in Chicago built criminal empires on bootlegging. They became rich, powerful, and incredibly violent. The noble experiment had an ironic side effect. It helped create organized crime in America. While some feared the evils of alcohol, others feared a different threat: communism. After the Bolshevik Revolution in Russia, a wave of paranoia swept the United States. This was the first Red Scare. Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer launched a series of raids, arresting thousands of immigrants and suspected radicals, often without warrants. This fear of foreigners and radical ideas fueled a rise in nativism. This nativist sentiment was written into law. New immigration acts severely limited entry for people from Southern and Eastern Europe, mostly Catholics and Jews, and almost completely banned immigration from Asia, reflecting a deep-seated prejudice in American society. Nowhere was this fear clearer than in the trial of Sacco and Vanzetti. to Italian immigrants and anarchists accused of robbery and murder. Despite a weak case against them, many believe they were convicted and executed for their political beliefs and their heritage, not for the crime. This climate of fear and nativism also led to the ugly resurgence of the Ku Klux Klan. The KKK of the 1920s was a powerful national organization with millions of members, targeting not only African Americans, but also Catholics, Jews, and immigrants. The clash between the old and the new wasn't just about immigration or booze. It was a battle between modern science and religious fundamentalism. And it went on trial in a small town in Tennessee in 1925. This was the Scopes trial, or the monkey trial. A high school teacher, John T. Scopes, was accused of breaking the law by teaching Darwin's theory of evolution. The trial was a setup by the ACLU to challenge the law, and it became a national spectacle. In a stunning move, Darrow called Bryan himself to the stand as an expert on the Bible. Darrow's questioning made Bryan's literal interpretations seem foolish to many in the press. Scopes was found guilty, but the trial was a major public relations victory for modernism. This was a huge clash of values: science versus tradition, modernism versus fundamentalism. Which side do you think really won the Scopes trial? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Perhaps the most iconic symbol of the Roaring Twenties was the New Woman, better known as the Flapper. She was the absolute opposite of her mother's generation. Flappers chopped off their hair, raised their hemlines, and wore makeup. They smoked, they drank, they danced in jazz clubs. They were independent, assertive, and they challenged every social convention about how women should behave. This newfound freedom wasn't just about fashion. The 19th Amendment, ratified in 1920, gave women the right to vote. And with new jobs available, women were entering the workforce and pursuing higher education in record numbers, gaining economic and social independence. Even in the home, life was changing. While still largely expected to be homemakers, the new wave of electric appliances promised to free women from the drudgery of housework, giving them more leisure time. You can't talk about the 1920s without talking about the man who put America on wheels, Henry Ford. Ford didn't invent the car, but he perfected a way to build it so efficiently that it became affordable for the average family: the moving assembly line. This reduced the time to build a car from over 12 hours to about 90 minutes. It didn't just change car manufacturing, it changed, well, everything. And here's the genius part. He shocked the world by doubling his workers' wages to $5 a day. His reasoning was brilliant and simple. He wanted his own workers to be able to afford the very cars they were making. He was creating his own customers. Life on the assembly line was tough, though. The work was repetitive and monotonous. Ford was obsessed with efficiency. There was even a story that he hired investigators to spy on his workers at home to make sure they weren't drinking or gambling, which could make them less efficient at work. If Ford put America on the ground, our next hero conquered the skies. In 1927, a young unknown airmail pilot named Charles A. Lindbergh decided to attempt the impossible. His goal? To be the first person to fly solo, non-stop, from New York to Paris. For 33 and a half hours, he flew, alone, with no radio, no parachute, and just a few sandwiches. To stay awake, he reportedly held his eyelids open with his fingers. When he landed in Paris, he became the most famous man on Earth overnight. Lucky Lindy was a hero for the modern age, a symbol of American courage, individualism, and technological achievement in a time of growing mass culture. But not all the influential figures of the 20s were mainstream heroes. Marcus Garvey was a Jamaican immigrant who became a powerful voice for millions of African Americans. Garvey founded the Universal Negro Improvement Association, or UNIA. He preached a message of black nationalism and Pan-Africanism. He urged African Americans to take pride in their heritage and to build their own self-sufficient communities and businesses, separate from a white society that he believed would never fully accept them. Though his steamship company ultimately failed and he was deported for mail fraud, Garvey's ideas of black pride and economic self-sufficiency would inspire future generations, from the Nation of Islam to the civil rights leaders of the 50s and 60s. The Roaring Twenties was a decade of deep contradictions. It was an age of prosperity and poverty, of freedom and fear, of bathtub gin and Bible-thumping preachers. It was an era of profound social and cultural change where a new, modern America was being born. It was a 10-year-long party. But every party has to end, and the hangover from this one would be the worst economic crisis in history, the Great Depression. And that's where our story is heading next. So much happened in just 10 years. What do you think was the most important or surprising part of the Roaring Twenties? Share your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for joining us on this trip back in time. If you want to find out what happens when the party stops and the bills come due, make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss part 2. Until next time, stay curious.